Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys and the Sounds in Cinema podcast.
Everything sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
We're doing Rocky Balboa. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, of course, the mad fighter himself, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Hit me, Tom.
I'm asking, because you're so good at dancing around your problems, you might as well dance with me. I ain't that good, but probably better than the average bear. I don't know where that came from.
An improv, I think.
I was going to say, is this the beginning of Stallone Tourette's? Is this the first historically recorded example of Stallone's no longer performing dialogue, but now just saying words?
Yeah. Because I don't know about that scene, but I had a specific note about the light bulb scene. That he did not expect the light bulb to be so bright, and so everything afterwards is improvised. He just is Rocky Balboa so much that he can do anything as Rocky Balboa.
I think a high percentage of this movie is outtakes, but I think whether retrospectively or preemptively, Stallone was able to fashion that into Italian neorealism documentary, because as we know,
exactly.
He is a cinematic genius.
Yep. Listeners, for listeners, Tom literally just sent me a video
That's
yesterday. Right. An interview that Stallone was doing about Rocky IV, an episode we just recently did, and he was discussing all the things we discussed.
To the word.
to the letter. It was so funny to watch. It
really was. I guess
we were speculating about MTV in the 80s what
he specifically said, I was trying to imitate MTV as much as possible. I guess
that's why shots are no longer than 2.5 seconds long. Why there's so much montage. Right. Because he knew what the fuck he was doing.
There was only a couple of revelations in there. One that, well, I guess they're both kind of related, but that perhaps the muted color palette of the director's cut wasn't entirely intentional, because it sounds like the negatives were in pretty bad shape.
That's what
So maybe he had no choice but to kind of downplay the color because everything already looks so muddy. I don't know. That was the sense I got.
I got really sad too when he was talking about, because you're talking about 50,000 feet of film and it's just in pieces. And that you might want something that you just are never going to find.
And also that Stop or My Mom Will Shoot is in better shape than Rocky IV in the preservation department. Which is a sad state, which as he reported is a sad state of affairs.
I like Stop or My Mom Will Shoot more than most.
Oh, me
people,
too.
But not that much.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, maybe we do need an ultimate director's cut of that movie, and maybe it's a comic masterpiece waiting to be unveiled.
Right, exactly. He is underrated.
Not by us.
As a comedic genius. Yeah.
Overrated by us, underrated by everybody else.
I literally was just talking to Lady Chu the other day. For those of you that know, we have a sister podcast called the How Dare You podcast, and she is a co-host. And I was talking about the movie Oscar.
Yeah.
I love that movie. And I think that movie's hysterical, and nobody else seems to, and I don't know why.
There's nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't say it's hysterical. There's nothing wrong with that movie at all.
It's so funny.
Which is, I think, counter to most people's opinion of it. But it's, we asked this the very first time we did any Stallone movie. I said, how deep in the hole are you? How in the weeds are you when it comes to denying that Stallone can be bad occasionally? I guess Rocky V is our barometer now. how much we did both
Yeah.
despise that movie, despite the fact, you know, it's a Rocky movie, it's a Stallone movie, that he was involved in the writing of it. But maybe we don't like it because he didn't direct it. I don't know. I think that's a factor too.
Yeah, right.
Maybe we like him so much.
I was just thinking the same thing.
We hate John G. Avildsen more.
That's great. Today, however, we are talking about Rocky Balboa, the 2006 film that did bring Sylvester Stallone back to the director's chair.
Yeah, absolutely.
This movie is the high watermark at 77% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, good. I'm glad it's recognized as such.
Yeah, for the sequels. Budget of $24 million, opening weekend of $12.1 million. In the USA, $70.2 and $155.9 million in the world.
All right.
This is a respectable hit.
Yeah.
And both of us list this at the top of our Rocky sequel list.
Yeah. You know, in the 1995 movie, The Usual Suspects, there's a line that goes, "The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing people he didn't exist." I beg to differ.
Yes.
I think the greatest trick the devil ever pulled is Rocky Balboa. Because there's a satanic level of magic involved in having a belated sequel 16 years after the previous installment with...
Which was an utter failure,
right.
That last one.
Yeah, and a bomb at that. Starring an actor now, you know, legally too old to be a boxer.
Right.
In a movie about a boxer. With a storyline that involves virtual reality. I mean, there's no conceivable...
But actual boxing, unlike the last movie.
Well, but there's no conceivable reality in which this movie works. Except it did.
Right.
And it's the best and most beautiful film in the series.
Right. The thing about this movie, and I think you've alluded to this in our ranking episode, that the idea of the boxing in it is absurd, like completely ridiculous. And
I don't know. I mean, is it though? Well, that he is boxing.
I believe I'm just quoting you, but
well, you know,
so I think what works so well about this movie is that everything that has nothing to do with boxing, except why he wants to box, is perfect.
Yeah.
Where he is in his life, what's going on in his life, how he feels about Adrian dying, and what's going on with his son. That whole storyline is amazing. And then you juxtapose it with what you said was, but I actually think is still smart story-wise. This idea of the virtual reality boxing match.
Well, no. Well, this is the thing, you know. As I'm watching them, you know, like the first note I make about that is, you know, forget Seco. There's a new, you know, there's a new science fiction reality in town. This ESPN computer simulation that everyone
But that is absolutely something ESPN would do.
Well, not only that, it's something absolutely something ESPN would do. It's something that is based on, once again, on historical reality.
Right. Yeah, we have talked about that.
Because, you know, in the late 60s, a computer simulated a fight between Rocky Marciano and Muhammad Ali. And that's what this is based on. Stallone talks about that in that interview that I sent you, where he also revealed that the storyline of Rocky IV is based on a real historical incident in which Hitler sent a super fighter over to America to beat the shit out of Joe Louis. So it seems that the more fantastical these stories seem, the closer they are to actual reality, which I find fascinating.
It's amazing. It really
and you
does.
know, that's so it's actually you said it. It's a really smart story move.
Mm-hmm.
because it
Well, not just that, because he's smart enough in this movie. You spoke about his age. He's a boxer who's too old to legally box. And he's smart enough to know that. And even the character himself, when this fight is proposed to him, he's like, "Look, I'm not looking to like get embarrassed and get mangled. Like, you're crazy. This is insane."
Yeah, but you know, it's also, I mean, it also helps the other historical part that's quite interesting, you know, because I don't know about Marciano, but certainly Muhammad Ali boxed much older than he should have done in his career, and you know,
and Larry Holmes did that. George Foreman did that, but did it well.
So it's kind of putting.
He won the championship at like 45.
So it's kind of like putting it in the context of retired, you know, like semi-retired or retired fighters making a comeback, which is also smart. I also like the fact that even the movie seems to know how absurd it is, because Paulie refers to it as the cartoon fight.
Yeah.
which is, you know, which is good, you know, that cuts through
a multitude of
the nonsensicalness of it. However, I do want to remind you that Paulie was in a sexual relationship with a robot. So he should understand this level of technology better than anyone.
Right.
Paulie has put his penis in more advanced technology
Let's
than
be
this.
clear, he fucked that robot.
In the mid-'80s. So I'm not buying this. Oh, the cartoon fight. Yeah.
Right.
Whatever, computer fucker.
That's great. Oh, I love it. Well, I mean, where do we go from here? You know, one of my first notes is how efficient the exposition is in the first 5 to 6 minutes of this movie. You know everything you need to know about Rocky's life.
Yeah, that's
where he is.
That's absolutely true. And
early on,
I kind of noted that it's actually it's a really smart place to put Rocky at, because it like.
And he recognized that early on in his writing process. He went to Talia Shire and said, "I think this is how it has to be," but asked permission. Like, "Are you okay?"
She should have seen it coming after Burgess Meredith and
I was gonna say
Carl Weathers.
Burgess,
she
Carl
must have
Weathers.
Known it was her or Paulie next for the chopping board, right?
She's lucky she was in Rocky V. Let's face it.
Not one but two 1990s disasters.
Yeah.
And I noted in it, you know, so like the socioeconomic circumstances doesn't disavow Rocky V, but there's also a sense that he's moved up a little bit from then. It's a logical extrapolation of where that movie ended and till now, which, you know, bridges the gap between a movie that, you know, they all wanted to kind of move away from tonally, but not necessarily in content. So it's a smart move. But I'm just struck by how immediately iconic this new idea of Rocky seems. I mean, maybe it's the Creed movies, but it seems like it's been around a lot longer. Like the image of him by Adrian's grave with the chair that he puts back in the tree when he's done with it. It's like to me that is as essential Rocky imagery as, you know, any of the stuff from the first couple of movies.
Running up the steps.
And I think that's you know, that's the key to this movie, is that it makes everything feel so organic that it feels like it's always been with us. But when you think about it logically, like, well, this can't predate Adrian's death. But because he's you know, but and you know, the Creed movies obviously run with those images, but still I'm just struck by how immediately normal this feels for Rocky.
Not just that, but again, back to the efficiency. So you know where he is, you know that he's alone, but you know that even Paulie shows up and says, "Hey, where's your kid?" And he goes, "It's all right, Paulie." And so you know there's a strain there. You know that the son's kind of removed.
And again, another from his life, completely
and
plausible extrapolation of where we left the series 16 years ago.
Yeah.
That's also, and I think what to me is crucial about this movie is it takes advantage of the serial storytelling possibilities that a series of this length and time span makes possible, and it takes advantage of every aspect of that. And having this kind of relationship cycle with his son throughout the last 2 or 3 movies, I think is beautifully done.
Well, and not just that, but they have the moment when he finally sees his son, when he goes to his son's job, is perfectly done.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say like 99% of this movie is perfectly pitched. That's why it's the best in the series.
You're right.
In the sequels.
You're absolutely right. Because I can remember seeing it in the theater, and some of the things I respected so much was that scene with his son, because you see how much Rocky wants to be connected to his son and just be in his life.
Mm-hmm.
But not only do you see the hesitancy from his son, but you see the why.
Yeah.
And it's not hitting you over the head with it in the sense of, he doesn't say it to him until much later. You just see people constantly coming up to Rocky Balboa and saying, "Hey, can I have an autograph? Oh, champ, how are you?" Even with just a few words, you see how slighted his son feels.
And in addition to that, so what I think this movie's really good at is kind of bridging the gap between the two lives that Rocky has led in the series that we've seen. His life as a national global celebrity, and as this kind of street guy come good, and this the fact that it's just people in his people in his neighborhood in the streets of Philadelphia coming up to him. There's no sense of his celebrity going beyond that. It's just people asking for photos,
because he's their guy.
He's a local celebrity now, and that's the perfect place for him to be at this stage, for both the storytelling and the plausibility. But also, thematically, this movie to me is about the limits of nostalgia. It's like how far can you go with nostalgia before you have to move on, and. To me, the restaurant is the fact that it's called Adrian's, the restaurant he owns is sort of is literally signposting that.
And one of the first people we see is Spider, who is literally the first person you see him fighting in the entire series. But
tonally, Rocky. They're smart enough to that they'll have this moment of pure nostalgia that will be undercut by something, by an awareness that. It's kind of backward looking, and dangerous to be to.
You mean in other movies or in this movie?
So we have an indulgent moment of nostalgia, and it'll be undercut usually by Paulie saying something. Early on in the movie, so he says time goes so fast, and Paulie replies, "Not fast enough." And I think and when he gets to the restaurant, I love everything about the restaurant. I love the fact that he puts on a jacket as if he's a performer. But it's also like the guy who has to be given a jacket at the door because of the dress code. It's a combination of the two things.
Well, but also part of it is he's the little chimp that has to go and get the coins.
It's directed as if he's been pulling this shtick so long, the diners are barely interested anymore. It's like the sense that Rocky's nostalgia for the life he's had is now too much for everyone else around him.
Right.
And that's such an interesting proposition, and that's what the movie got. That's what the drama of the movie is about to me.
Well, and going back to the scene that I was talking about, with where he does see his son, there are like the one thing this movie has is just great moments of choice. In that scene, there's a moment where Rocky asks his son, "Did I do something wrong?"
Oh, yeah.
And that's heartbreaking, man. Like, that says everything about where their relationship is right now.
Yeah.
And just the idea that his son is saying, no, like, everything's fine. I'm going to see you tomorrow. I'll come to the restaurant, but doesn't show up.
Mm-hmm.
Those things.
Yeah.
Because that felt so emotionally honest. And that's where... Because we haven't felt that in a long time in this series.
It just
even though like 3 and 4 have those moments peppered in. I like the beach scene. We both like that staircase scene in Rocky 4. But they're getting more and more outlandish and cartoonish.
Oh, this is
and this is so grounded.
It pulls back in pretty much every aspect. I mean, there's an early sign of that. The scene that I just referenced when he says "not fast enough." I noted at that point that we've endured. If you're looking at the series back to back, you've endured a whole movie of where the dynamics and the performances just didn't feel right, and it's like someone's just flicked a switch and they're just fixed, like immediately.
Right.
And that sets the tone for the rest of the movie. Like every time anything happens, it just feels right for the series, and They backtrack on the demonizing of opponents as well in a really positive way, which is not only important for this series, but is then crucial for what will go on to be Creed. Because without that resetting of Rocky's legacy of giving parallel narratives and character arcs to the opponents, you don't really have Creed, And I suppose 3 is the only really outlier. Is the only outlier there. What they do between Rocky 4 and Creed 2, kind of, one makes up for the other.
Sure,
but it seems very deliberate here to make Mason Dixon more in the Apollo Creed mode than the Clubber Lang mode.
Well, and I want to talk about that some more.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had 1, maybe 2 craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here discussing the 2006 film Rocky Balboa. All right, Tom, when we last left, we were talking about Tarver, and so here's my question to you. Considering that the last film, Rocky V, included a real boxer, and that his acting chops were not up to snuff, don't you think it's kind of remarkable that he went back to that well for this movie? And like you said, what he does, the choices he makes works.
Right.
He's not vilifying the person. This person, Tarver, has a good want or need for the fight.
Yeah.
It makes sense. They have the sense enough to show enough backstory of him with his old trainer.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, you talk about emotional honesty, and for us to have that scene between him and his trainer Martin, and you know, for us to know what their backstory is, and it's interesting that you brought up Rocky 5 because there's while keeping more or less with the timeline of Rocky 5 such as it is.
Right.
It does a lot that is a riposte to how things were done in Rocky 5 and how we treated certain subjects. And to me, like thematically, this is all the same stuff that we got with Tommy Gunn.
Right.
Right? He's basically, Mace had basically done to his trainer what Gunn did to Rocky in Rocky 5.
Right.
We learn. So it's kind of like...
But it's to them, it's all like in the game.
Right. It's an emotionally honest redo of that emotionally dishonest storyline that we talked about extensively.
And my favorite part is well, if you want to give me any of that money...
Yeah.
And they both laugh about it. Like, that's not going to happen.
And as the movie goes on, it's like, it's like they've figured out how to do that Tommy Gunn storyline without it being a caricature.
Yeah.
Because we have characters who are basically surrogates for that, that Don King clone we had.
Yeah, we have two
Richard
of them.
Gant. In the last movie, there's a couple of managers who are, at least in their place in the story is exactly the same, but they feel like genuine versions of that type.
Right.
As opposed to, absolute caricatures of it.
Right.
They
look like, they feel like promoters. They feel like people who want to try and find a way to make the public at large love Tarver in a way that feels honest. And the whole thing that they're selling Rocky on is, look, he's not in there to mangle you. He's going to carry you. It's a show. We're just putting on a show. You're going to make a little money.
Yeah, he's not a Bond villain, right? He hasn't got this giant Machiavellian plan.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what's great. That's what's great about it. They bullshit Rocky a little bit, but not much.
Yeah, exactly.
They're two-faced, but that's the nature of their job. And it kind of to me, it vindicates what I was saying about Rocky 5, which is that there's nothing wrong with it on the level of content. It's all about if you execute this properly, this is really interesting dramatic material.
Could
and this movie in the Mason Dixon storyline, and the fact that it's something of a redo of the Rocky 5 subplot, I think just goes to prove that. So, I mean, we both talked about how conscious this was as a kind of a riposte to Rocky 5, an apology for it. And I think part of that is actually going back to the well and doing it right this time.
Yeah.
As opposed to saying, okay, he's famous again, and this fall from this, this poverty and this fall from grace never happened. They don't do that, but they answer it in other more interesting ways. That's all about, doing real drama with the same content.
Correct.
Instead of cartoonish nonsense.
Yeah. But it still feels like a risk to me.
Yeah.
And maybe it was just because he met Tarver and it was as simple as, this guy's charismatic. I think he could be a decent actor. And because he's good in the movie.
He's very good he's great in the movie, and it's kind of like anti-charisma almost.
Right.
Because that's what's interesting about this movie. Like, the obvious way would be to have this fighter that everyone loves, but in fact the storyline is that this guy can get no love from anyone.
Right.
And he's jealous of the fact that Rocky,
is beloved.
Is just he can go into a room and he's everyone's friend.
Right.
And that's a much more interesting tension to me.
Yeah.
Than and that,
because you could imagine as a real fighter who has to get in the ring and take a beating and give a beating and say, like, what else do you want?
Right.
Like, this is my job and I'm doing it well.
Well, and that's it. And I think Stallone is smart enough to blame, like, the boxing industry and the way society at large treats people as the problem here. It's like, it's impossible for, you know, it's basically it's impossible for anyone in this world to get recognition for being good at what they do, whether it's his son and the, you know, all he's going through with his work,
right.
whether it's Marie, you know, who,
and we haven't talked about Marie yet, so that's,
well, we you know, and I think you know, Stallone, it's a very embittered look at the way society is developed.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like the individual has become basically, you know, pushed down by the structures around them.
Sure.
And
well, and
Rocky
what I like,
Rocky is trying to sort of, in various ways, trying to reinvigorate the individual in society.
Well, I think one of the things, again, like, you know, on the line of secret smart guy, the brilliant thing about having the character of Marie,
oh, so good,
and then juxtaposing it with the character of, say, like a Mason the Line Dixon,
yeah,
is that idea of what you were just speaking to about the idea of how difficult it is to move up within the society that's around you. Yeah. And the difference between her and Mason the Dixon Line as this sort of his world-class talent as an athlete. For so many people, that is the only way to move up. And if you don't have that, society, society will find a way to keep pushing you down.
Yeah.
The world around us will you know, find a way to make your life difficult at all times.
Yeah. And, you know, again, I don't think Stallone is pushing the political ideas behind this, but we do get a flavor of the idea that racism might be involved in that.
Right.
I think when you see the reaction to the computer simulation, how that's divided along racial lines.
Right.
You get the sense that maybe for the first time, Stallone is getting the sense of how, like, racially segregated the response to his movies is. So I think this movie is sort of an answer, an answer and an apology for that too, and that's great.
It at least feels like it's on his mind.
Yeah, and exactly, and again, you know, this is why I think without this movie, Creed cannot happen.
Right.
Because this is the place that Creed can go from, but it can't really go from Rocky 5, and it can't really go from sort of basically Rocky 3 to 5. It can't happen for various reasons. It's interesting, as you know. I think it's on his mind is quite interesting because, you know, Paulie's still a racist.
Yeah.
He has several moments of racism in this movie.
So what I find interesting, though, is that Paulie is still racist, but Paulie is still, right now, Paulie is Rocky's emotional relationship. And what I find really interesting in this movie is how well they know each other.
Yeah.
Because it's Paulie that says, you're mad at her because she's gone or because she left you. And he's like, she didn't leave, Paulie. She died. But Paulie was right. That's what he's pissed about.
Yeah.
And when he starts talking about the things that are going on in the basement, and they have several conversations like, is the stuff in the basement gone? Like after the fight. So Paulie's still a racist, but he's still a full human being.
Oh, he's definitely a full human being. By the way, I remember commenting in the Rocky 2 episode that there wasn't really a place for Paulie within that story.
Mm-hmm.
But this has gone full circle because he's everywhere in this movie.
Yeah.
Everywhere you need him to be. He's Rocky's carer. He's the guy who cuts through all the nostalgia.
Right.
Like instantly. He's part of the artistic soul.
And part of the reason is because he can sell everything that is nostalgic for money.
Yeah.
That's a plot point.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But he is, he's also, again, like, he's that dark doppelganger of Rocky. He's like, I know what you really are. You don't want to admit this is what you are, but whenever you have unpleasant feelings, that's me. I am that side of you.
Exactly.
So it's a fantastic place, and the addition. We've been everywhere with Paulie.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is a little bit of a jab towards Rocky V that he's now in charge of his finances again, as if none of that ever happened.
Yeah.
I think that is at least an acknowledgement that scapegoating Paulie for that was a narrative mistake.
Right.
Because he's back in charge of his finances.
Well, there's it's interesting because you have that aspect to it, and you also he's also in this movie, he's such a counterpart to Rocky at all times.
Yeah.
When they go on that Adrian nostalgia sadness tour,
yeah,
where Rocky is going to all the places that meant something to him and Adrian, and
yeah.
Paulie agrees to go along, but the whole time he's just, let's go, come on.
That's the carer dimension. It feels like dimension because it feels like he's sort of taking a guy with dementia around.
Mm-hmm.
That's the feel.
But
of
then
that
also
scene.
emotionally,
and
because
his nostalgia is depicted as a kind of Alzheimer's.
Yeah, but then
which is great because then you can do recap montages and it feels somewhat organic with a man who is sort of on the verge of like an Alzheimer's inability to distinguish between past and present.
Emotionally, it's really important to have Paulie there because he actually leaves at a certain point. He says, "This is ridiculous."
Yeah.
Like she's gone. Like I'm out of here. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to me that clearly this is something they do every year, and clearly Rocky goes to the gravesite every day.
Yeah.
And for him, that's all he's got.
Yeah.
And so if Paulie leaves and he's not going to be included in this anymore, that stirs up the basement even more. Now I'm all alone, which would make him want to fight even more.
Yeah.
So there's a point Secret smart guy. Sorry. This movie is so smart.
No, that's all there. That's definitely all there, and we add to Paulie's kind of characterization, because of Adrian, because Adrian died relatively young, he's now feels guilty about the way he treated her when she was alive.
Yeah.
And that's a lovely turn for his character.
Absolutely.
In addition to everything else that you've been talking about. And it's really interesting, in Rocky IV, when you finally get a tender moment between Rocky and Paulie. And in this movie, it's it's a parade of tender moments between the two of them.
Right.
It's like you wait 4 movies and then suddenly it's like a carnival of tender moments between the two of them. But it not only does it work, it's the absolute heart of the movie, which is not to say that he still isn't he's still the same character, we know, because he says lots of racist things to people. And he still has that clownish, buffoonish edge. I gotta say, the scene where Paulie, who's just been fired,
I was just gonna bring that up,
with half a pig under his arm, and a bunch of paintings under his other arm,
and he walks into the restaurant,
a black eye, and grabs a bottle of booze from behind the bar is worth the price of admission alone.
Yeah.
I think that may be his best comic moment in the entire kind of series of sequels. And I actually this is why this movie, when I first saw this movie, I was kind of blinded by how good it is.
Right.
And I was immediately in denial about that.
It couldn't have been.
Right, because I was like, my instantaneous reaction, which is my reaction now, is this is the best version of this scene that I've encountered so far. This is the best version of this relationship. This is the best version of this shtick.
Yeah.
So there's Paulie, which is my favorite Paulie moment ever. There is my favorite ever Rocky gaffe in the restaurant with the two promoters, where, you know, they ask what's good on the menu, and he replies, "Yeah, it's all edible."
Yeah.
And one of the promoters laughs like it's meant as a joke, and Rocky looks around.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, at the time, I remember thinking,
funny?
"Is that the funniest scene I've ever seen in a Rocky sequel?"
Right.
And it is, but I just didn't want to admit it because this movie shouldn't be as good as it is.
Right.
There's no way that the last iteration of this, you know, plot device should work better than it's ever worked before.
Of course.
And, as you know, since the original. But that is the magic trick that this movie pulls off.
And just but like my next note here is, one of the things I noticed is well, maybe that's unfair because we talked about how super secret smart Rocky IV is as a director, but but the note I wrote down was he feels like such a more not a more accomplished, but such a better director.
Perhaps less outwardly accomplished, but
right.
a more artistic,
thoughtful and
artistically skilled
yeah.
director. He really, to me, he paints this movie.
Exactly.
It's an expressionistic movie in a way that, you know, he in Rocky 3 and 4 he learned a bag of cinematic tricks.
Right.
And now he's able to pull back from the technique and explore, you know, things like tone and emotion and
right.
uses of color and light.
Yes.
In this movie.
That fight with his son is it not only the content is beautiful, but the look is beautiful. And light is a part of that.
The color of this
movie
is so interesting. He manages to make color both muted and pop at the same time.
Right. Well, and we'll get to it when we get to it, but the one thing that I truly love that he does with that fight is that that fight is not done on film. It's shot exactly the way an HBO boxing match would appear to an audience.
Until it goes black and white.
Yes. But I'm saying...
No, but that's part of the it absolutely starts out this way, and that's another element of his directorial style which he's pushing here is the ability to sort of play it as documentary fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's an early scene in the movie which is just Rocky buying food at the market.
Yeah.
And it looks totally unscripted. It looks like a scene out of an Italian neo-realist movie. And again, and when we get to the fight, we have another kind of.
I find that scene very interesting too, because it's interesting because you find Rocky using a set of skills we never knew he had that have clearly been
negotiating.
What's that?
Negotiating?
Yeah, and just the idea that getting the exact right amounts to make that night's dinner service, you know?
Yeah.
All of that felt, I guess just because I've worked in restaurants a long time.
Yeah.
And so I know what that's like. And it's fascinating for me to watch because it feels so, again, like everything else in this movie, it feels honest.
Yeah, I mean, honest is a good word. I think tonally what I really like about this movie and why it kind of sums up the rest of the movies in the series and is the best version of them is because it finds that sweet spot between romanticization and realism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean, like, you know, from the color, which is both muted and popping at the same time, to... You know, they lean into the romance when they need to, and then they pull back into reality when they need to. And it never seems like they make a wrong move either way. Like, they dip their toe just enough in each, you know, for when they need to do it.
Yeah.
Without indulging in either. And that's sort of what I love about, you know, like it feels it feels hard and real sometimes, and sometimes it's soft and mellow.
Yeah, exactly.
That's that's the sweet spot of the series. Similarly with tone, it's in that sweet spot between comedic and straight. Not too funny, not too serious.
Yeah,
that's just
it's pitched perfect.
Yeah, it all seems very, very deliberate, because it's none of it is extraneous. So, we feel everything feels very plausible, and then you'll get a moment like, he goes into the boxing commission, gives them an impassioned monologue, and they give him a license. It's like, okay, well, this is not reality as we know it.
No,
this is a romanticization.
But he pays service to it.
But you pay service, exactly.
Yeah.
At least, and it's interesting that that's one of the scenes he put back in Rocky IV.
Yeah.
Was a similar commission scene.
Well, I think maybe he saw how good this one was.
Yeah.
And thought,
right.
I should put that shit back in. Because the moment, he sort of loses his temper and his hand goes on his hip, but the character realizes what he's there for and why he's there. Yeah. And he checks himself. To not,
it's a night.
Just pitch perfect. It's so. Everything about it is so emotionally laid bare. It's a great performance from Stallone in this movie.
It's an astonishingly good performance, especially coming after Rocky V, where he pretty much misjudged everything.
Yeah.
I know it's 16 years, but for our purposes, it's the last thing.
Right.
But I think that's it. It's just, even within that scene, you get some notes of realism. Like he has his Jimmy Stewart moment, right, in the boxing commission. He gets up and he gives his impassioned monologue, and everyone changes their mind. Everyone just changed based on what he said. But he does. It's not. But he doesn't get to sort of do the full monologue uninterrupted. At one point, one of the commissioners sort of corrects his interpretation of the Bill of Rights, which again doesn't happen in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Right.
Like nobody goes, yeah, but that's a bit of an idealistic way of looking.
It's not exactly like that.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful, but. This storyline relies on transformative monologues to get us from one point of the story to another.
Yeah.
And that's fine, because, we as in Rocky 2, I'm like, well, that piece of melodrama is earned.
Mm-hmm.
So here I feel like that romance is earned here, because the movie's not going to indulge in it too much.
Right.
At any point. And the basis of the movie is grounded, is social reality in a way that the last movie was trying to do, but actually did the opposite.
Right.
And that the previous two movies weren't really interested in.
No, yeah.
So you get away with a lot of fantasy, for want of a better word, because. Partly because it's, in the series, fantasy and romance is still a part of the series.
It's a huge part of the series, but like we were just saying, in this movie, in order for it to be believable, you just have to pay a little service to it. And he knows exactly how much to do and exactly how much works to make us say, yeah, this could happen. So
well, it's like putting in that news item in the movie about the Marciano.
If you like podcasts like I do, boy, do I have a treat for you. You need to
stay on target
and check out the Sounds in Cinema podcast. Listen as your host, sound designer and music creator Tony Parham, and co-host, musical performer and sound lover Derek Hansen, D-Rock if you're nasty. And I am, discuss all things sound related to film, television, stage, and theatrical productions. They discuss environmental sounds, bioacoustics, dialogue, the nature of communication through sound, but as an added bonus, they drink beer and try to
stay on target.
Find them wherever you get your podcasts and listen to the pure mania of a man who can charitably be described as Doug, the dog from Up, and another man with a soothing and sultry voice trying to get that man to
stay on target.
That's the Sounds in Cinema podcast. Tune in and listen to the sounds they are creating just for you. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here, finishing up talking about the 2006 film Rocky Balboa, directed once again by Sylvester Stallone. He comes back to the helm, Tom, in a good way.
Yeah, different man.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Before we get to this fight, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. One is Little Marie, and the next is this fight he has with his son.
Marie, it makes me think of Indiana Jones Minute when they did Last Crusade, and they thought, there's so much that doesn't work in this movie, but the one thing that you think could never work, his relationship with his dad, is the best thing in the movie. And I kind of feel the same way about this. It's like Adrian's dead. This is, well, it's not a love interest, and that's why it's good, but at least
that's why it works. Exactly.
At least in broad strokes, that's what it seems like.
Yeah.
Outwardly. It's like,
I remember,
it's like this shouldn't, again, in no conceivable reality does this storyline work. I think, as you were saying, the fact that it's Little Marie and we're picking up an incidental character from the first movie
Rocky
is such a masterstroke.
But it's an emotional surrogate.
I don't. It never falls into that for me because she's again, like, you know.
No, I mean for the character of Rocky. He's making this choice. So
their relationship, the difference for me is their relationship is everything other than what he had with Adrian. I think that's the key to it.
Completely.
Like, it's, you know, they play the paternal element, they play the platonic element, but they don't play the romantic. It's a different
emotional relationship, but it's still a substitute to me.
But they're also aware of that as a pitfall because of his relationship with her son and the way he reacts to him.
Yeah.
And so the movie, we're
not just that.
We're basically steps, aren't we? We're there going like, I don't like this. I don't like where this is going.
Because I remember having that thought as I was watching the movie the first time in the movie theater. And I thought, if these two get together, I'm off this movie
completely.
For fucking ever.
100%.
And he's smart enough in the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes of their relationship on screen to have him say, listen, I don't want you to think anything weird's going on here. My wife's gone, but she ain't gone, you know? Well, and you feel completely relieved at that point.
And how he deals with Steps and how Steps deals with him. Like, once he's all right with it, we're all right with it.
Right.
Which is a really smart way to play that storyline. But, you know, they go as far, and, you know, at the moment at which you feel like that it could shit the bed and that they'll get together, we just have a tender kiss, and she gives him a photo of Adrian.
Right, because you for a half second you worry again. You're like, no, this isn't going to happen. You're not doing it now. And she does this very sweet thing of giving him a photo of his wife.
The only overlap, which is actually an overlap that I like, is that she falls into the Connie Silieri role that Adrian has in some of the later Rocky movies. Mm-hmm. Like she starts advising him on things.
Yeah,
I like that is where they draw the line, because I think in terms of how these stories work, you do need that. You do need that in the character,
but it's also what I like is it's, you know,
because let's not forget this is the first.
She's giving different reasons than Adrian would.
Absolutely, and let's not forget, you can't underestimate this enough. This is the first Rocky movie where Rocky doesn't have Adrian.
Right.
Like, this entire series is built about Rocky and his bride from the very beginning.
Correct.
This is the first movie without that. So you are expecting something to not feel right, for everything, you know, involving his relationship with other women to feel totally artificial, and that could not be further away from the truth.
Of course.
And the fact that she's Little Marie helps, but it's the way that they continue to write and develop their relationship that makes it a success.
Right.
I have nothing but good things to say about it. I mean, even
it's a couple like these. It's one of my biggest notes about why this movie's good, because they get that relationship right.
Yeah,
and they get the relationship with his son right.
I think, and listen, I don't need to tell you, Stallone is by no means a feminist, but
right
in his own patriarchal way, he makes a point of making this movie about giving women self-respect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's something inherently sexist about the fact that they need to be given self-respect rather than
right.
just being entitled to it. But through Marie and through a much more minor character in this movie, Angie, who is like this kind of
right.
this screaming woman at the bar, who's like in this kind of like entourage of women.
It's kind of like the ugly side of celebrity.
Yeah.
You know? You owe me something. Why don't you buy me a drink? Kind of a
And she just
idea.
says, get rid of this guy. Stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
And we see later, in the movie, she sort of
that worked.
Yeah. It's clumsy. Probably looks very old fashioned and doesn't. There's problems with it in 2021, but I do appreciate that it's there.
Yeah.
That it is part of the representation of female characters in this movie at the very least.
Well, and next I want to talk about this fight with his son because
the fight with his son. Okay, yeah. Back to street fighting.
It's a masterstroke, though, Tom. It's a masterstroke of emotionality. It's something that to me is pitched so perfect, and because he makes an excuse for his son at every turn that he possibly can.
Yeah.
To the point where no matter what his son does, like what he ends up doing at the beginning of the movie is asking, have I done something wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And then that turns into something else. And this is what I want to do. I want to listen to it. So I'm going to play the scene. It's probably about 90 seconds. Let's take a listen to it, and then we'll have a chat about it. Deal?
Sounds good.
You ain't gonna believe this, but you used to fit right here. I'd hold you up and say to your mother, this kid's gonna be the best kid in the world. This kid's gonna be somebody better than anybody ever knew. And you grew up good and wonderful. It was great just watching you every day. It was like a privilege. Then the time come for you to be your own man and take on the world, and you did. But somewhere along the line, you changed. You stopped being you. You let people stick a finger in your face and tell you you're no good. And when things got hard, you started looking for something to blame, like a big shadow. Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now, if you know what you're worth, now go out and get what you're worth. But you gotta be willing to take the hits and not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that. I'm always gonna love you no matter what. No matter what happens. You're my son, you're my blood. You're the best thing in my life. But until you start believing in yourself, you ain't gonna have a life. Don't forget to visit your mother.
All right. Tom, this is the highlight of the movie for me.
For a lot of people, too.
I love that scene because it starts off with... I just think it's so brilliantly written. It starts off with sort of boxing platitudes. Life lessons through boxing, and then he becomes a father. I mean, he actually starts parenting his own child.
Yeah.
When he starts saying, you know, that's how losers talk, and that ain't you.
Yeah.
I love everything about that scene, and we talked about colors and tones and emotionality, and the emotionality of the direction of that scene too, and the lighting.
Mm-hmm.
All of it.
And that slight tinkle of the Bill Conti score underneath.
Yeah.
It's like, again, just enough sentimental sprinkling.
Right. It does it just right.
To carry it through. And it's really interesting, you know, it's another transformative monologue, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But they push the visceral nature of it enough that you buy it and you see why.
Well, because again, it's a great performance from Stallone right there.
Well, and you get the sense of why Rocky Jr. might buy it, and you also because this is a relationship that's serial in nature. We know that this is just one cycle in the relationship.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing I love about it is that during that whole moment, Rocky Jr. doesn't say a thing.
Yeah.
Which also feels emotionally honest, but Stallone is smart enough to keep putting the camera back on him.
Yeah.
Because you see like the shell-shocked nature of his own son.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because he is getting gut punched by his own father emotionally right there.
Right.
And he doesn't know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
Because somewhere deep inside, I think he knows that his father's right.
Yeah.
I'm blaming other people for what's going wrong in my life.
Hey, remember that time you abandoned me for a circus hick? That's what I would have said. Hey, we don't talk about that.
We became home team by the end of that. Hey, relax.
Yeah. We don't talk about anything to do with 1990 or 1986, whenever the fuck it was.
Yeah, 1990 in our lives, 1986 in theirs.
Yeah.
At any rate, I love that scene, and that
also the way it starts. You know, it makes it very clear that the characters in this movie live under the yoke of modern America. You know, it's a mean and nasty world out there.
Right.
I mean, that's as far as it feels like he's ever gone with social criticism.
Well, but it's you know, kind of going back to Rocky V. There's that idea of you can have everything and lose it.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
And life is going to hit you. So what do you do when that happens?
Mm-hmm.
That you know, it's like it's the lesson that Rocky himself has learned.
Yeah.
Through the course of all these sequels.
And it's a good course correction from Rocky V as well. Like there was such a kitsch approach to the idea of like street fighting and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps.
Right.
It's done in such a cartoonish way. It's nice to sort of hear it just laid out on the line with passion and no extraneous fluff for the sake of entertainment.
Yeah. Well, and then we get to our fight, and
we
again,
got our training montage first.
Well, yeah. Sorry, I was gonna say we get to the fight, but first we have both a training montage and a press conference. And
I mean, first of all, you know, the press conference is the shades of all the press conferences from the previous movies.
Yeah.
But it's closest to Rocky V and just better. That's all. I mean,
everything, yeah.
That's everything in this movie. But
well,
still.
I love the conversation between him and Mason Dixon after the press conference. He's like, "Listen, old man, don't fuck with me. I'll keep you in the fight as long as I can." And Rocky kind of makes it clear, like, I didn't come here to lose. I don't care
Yeah.
that I'm 110 years old. I'm going to give you my best.
It's really
and that joke they have. Again, we talked about jokes a lot, but when he says it's not over till it's over, he goes, "What is that from the 80s?"
Oh yeah.
Or he said from the 90s.
Again,
I can't remember what decades they chose. 90s, 80s, or 80s, 70s.
Cautious nostalgia, It's it's elusive. I'd add to that also, Marie can't remember the time that they like what she said when they met in the first movie.
Yeah.
Which I think is a clear sign that, nostalgia is completely subjective and not, it's what you remember. It's not what it is. Yeah, but I love the fact, we talked, I think, in the Planet of the Apes series about, like, how to do fan service without knocking fans over the head with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the sudden appearance of Duke at the press conference without any introduction, establishment, fanfare is absolutely the best way to bring him back into the fold.
So...
It's just like, he's here because he's always here. He's been here. He's been in my corner since Rocky 3. So, he's back now. I just love that.
Well, and like, that's my note. It was just so amazing to see Duke.
Yeah.
But
without knocking you over the head with it, making it a reunion, none of it.
No.
It's like, why wouldn't he be there?
Right, of course. And also, all he's doing is telling you everything Rocky can't do because of calcium deposits and how bad his knees are. And
I mean, that's to me, that is like the peak of this perfectly perched tone between nostalgia and realism.
Mm-hmm.
It pays heed to, like, all the series traditions of the the motivational speech and the trainer,
right?
But the reality of, you're old,
yeah,
you're brittle. And I think it's just fantastic. It reminds me of that scene from The Dark Knight Rises, where the Doctor's just saying,
"No, you
got no cartilage in your knee.
You got no cartilage. I don't recommend that you paraglide," or whatever it was.
But there's also a sense of, let's just get this out of the way, okay?
Yeah.
Right? There's a million reasons why this guy shouldn't.
But again, because they do that smart thing for the fight itself, because if Rocky had tried his best, Tarver would have torn him in half.
Yeah.
And Sylvester Stallone's smart enough to recognize that. And so what he does is, in the first couple rounds of the fight, Tarver, or Mason Dixon rather, breaks his hand. Yeah. And that changes the whole game and the whole thing for the fight.
Yeah.
So there's a narrative reason why Rocky stays in the fight beyond the fact that he's Rocky Balboa and has a heart. Which is smart.
Yeah, very smart.
By the way, did you read this? Did you know that because they filmed this fight, I think it was either before or after, I forget which, or an actual boxing match in Vegas.
Right. Okay, I was going to ask
And when he entered the ring, without any indication from Stallone himself or the filmmakers to ask them to do it, the entire crowd just started chanting Rocky.
Everyone knows the drill by now.
So when you hear that, that's spontaneous.
Yeah.
Which,
well, that's
as the actor, must have been amazing.
It's and this is such an interesting moment in the series because of that slippage between fact and fiction,
mm-hmm.
which has always kind of come to a fore with these boxing matches. But here, making it specifically the HBO coverage that we're watching.
Yes, I love it.
Like, the movie is watching a fight on TV.
Yes.
Right. That's what's happening
exactly.
Here. And I think like we've been put indirectly in the position of TV viewers before, but never like so specifically where you have idents, mm-hmm. and you're watching the coverage as you would see it on TV. Not
the high definition glossy look.
Right, exactly.
Of an HBO fight comes into, is how this fight starts.
And then, of course, Tyson appears.
Yes.
Which is, again, another tick in that sort of documentary column. But here's what I want to talk about. Here's another intertext that I think is important here.
All right.
In 1996, The Simpsons released an episode called The Homer They Fall,
Yes.
in which Homer enters the world of professional boxing.
That's how we opened the episode. I talked about fustigating.
Yeah, right. And obviously, because Homer has an unusually hard head.
Yes.
So he can take more punches than the average human, but he can't punch.
He has to wait till they tire themselves out.
Yeah. And obviously, you can see how this is inspired by Rocky to some extent. However, I think large parts of this fight are inspired by that episode of The Simpsons. I find it perfectly plausible that a man who put a robot in a movie because one talked to him in a pizza parlor caught a rerun of this episode, or somebody told him about this episode, and he lifted elements from it in there. Because Homer ends up fighting the heavyweight champion, Drederick Tatum.
Who is Tyson?
Yeah. He's completely outmatched. And he, the scene I remember, the moment I remember from the episode is that Drederick Tatum comes out to, latest gangster rap theme. And Homer comes out to Why Can't We Be Friends by War.
Right.
And I have to say, there's a very similar moment here.
Yes, there is.
In which Mason comes out to the latest gangster rap theme. And Rocky comes
and Homer.
to High Hopes by Frank Sinatra. Which is Paulie's pick.
Which is
obviously.
Paulie's choice. Which is also, that's a bit of a masterstroke that Paulie decides on the music.
It's just, and he just looks at him and says, I like, it's Sinatra. I mean, it works in so many ways. There's that sort of Italian brotherhood that, element to it. And
of course,
Sinatra's connection with the world that Stallone is in. But, oh my, and the fact that Rocky is reacting and didn't know about this, so I think he saw this episode, and I think he took that, and turned it into a great moment. But it's just another example of using the best version of something.
Right.
Like Mel Brooks, you got to know where to steal from.
Well, now what do you think
You're
about
stealing from Orson Welles and The Simpsons? You're in good company.
What do you think about the fight itself? Because I mean, they did this in Rocky IV as well. I don't think quite as much, but from what I understand, and he's in the ring with a professional boxer.
Right.
They just stood in the ring and hit each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like Rocky III.
No.
When you see a bunch of fake hits that are clearly fake hits.
Right.
They this fight feels more like a real fight than maybe any of the fights in the series.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like it feels like it's complementing that scene at the market. You're sort of like you're just watching Rocky. You're just watching Stallone shopping.
Right.
It's here. It's like now Stallone's in the ring with a professional fighter hitting him. I mean, it's the same. It certainly starts off that way. I think what's kind of interesting, because we've alluded to this before, that more than any fight other than in the original movie, this fight is less of an event and more just part of the rich mosaic of the film.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a scene in the film.
Exactly.
And the kind of ersatz TV coverage is actually a good way to detach us from that.
Of course.
This sense of like...
I was surprised to learn, by the way, that they filmed like 3 different endings. They filmed him losing. They filmed him winning. They filmed
I mean, that
a draw, I think, or something.
What they got was, he went, he goes the distance.
Yeah.
They don't push the implausibility. It's like, it's all about going the distance. It's all about, he just needs to finish the fight.
And also, this is the first time, because Rocky V took place in a street, but this is the first time where they're acknowledging
Lest we forget.
that the sport is acknowledging, like the toll that 2 men beating each other up takes. And so it's not 15 rounds, it's only 10 rounds or 12 or... and I really like that too.
when Rocky Jr. says, by the way, Milo Ventimiglia, excellent performance.
Yeah, unsung.
I was going to say, in specifically his viewpoint as a character, and this is very actory, but his viewpoint as the character is so clear. It's also very clear in the writing too, but his viewpoint is so clear. And it's just like it's an authentically aged version of that character.
Absolutely.
But so that's just by the by. But I did think it was interesting when he said it's been a long time since I've seen a fight, and it's like, hope he's talking about the one he watched on TV that was in Russia and not the one outside his house
in the street with the push in zoom of get him, he stole my room.
Oh my god, yeah.
So terrible.
And then the non also, yeah, what's great here is, having built that relationship between Mason and his trainer, now that pays off in this scene because Martin's giving him all the, this advice, and we see Mason's viewpoint on what's going on. And again, resisting the urge of the past few movies to just demonize.
I love it when they come out for the last round.
Yeah.
And what he says to Rocky, he says, "You're one crazy old man."
Right.
That's great.
It is great. And then we start to get halfway in and out of the TV coverage. Non-diegetic.
Yeah, we get some black and white. We get some stylized when he goes to his knee and has his speech about what did I say to the kid.
Yeah.
How you got to keep pushing forward.
So we haven't really talked about it in this movie, probably because it's such a good movie and it doesn't matter. But we've had quite a bit of recap montage so far. And now we're getting internal voiceover. And these are the two most alarming trends of late Stallone filmmaking.
Right.
For me. So they are in this movie, but again, they're just offset by everything else.
Yeah. And
they feel like, it's like, well, I guess his grief justifies the flashbacks. But internal voiceover, it just, he likes it, but it never really works.
He's a fan.
Yeah, he's a fan.
I would argue that it works better in this than probably anything else he did.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I'll take that.
Yeah.
But I was really interested to see how the black and white had these isolated fluorescent colors in it.
Yes.
Almost like, he's pulled from Raging Bull before, but now he's gone to Rumblefish.
Right, exactly.
He's just full film school bratting it now. Again, cine literacy, secret smart guy. We got some nice product placement with the goldenpalace.com ladies. Nice bit of money coming in from them, I'm sure.
Cha-ching.
Or maybe that was just, who the sponsors that were there.
Actually, yeah, because it was a real fight. So
it was a real fight.
Maybe they just piggybacked. Yeah.
And we have another recap montage in the ring. The excuse this time is concussion.
Oh, shit.
So it's, and then,
but I would also say, it's funny what we think of as important in a Rocky sequel and a Rocky fight. We're always looking for that eventual knockout. I love how this fight ends.
I was just gonna say exactly the same thing. I think the way that the fight ends and the way that the fight wraps up is,
this is the only movie in the series that feels like a truly real boxing match, especially at the end.
Well, and it's all about what we've earned in the course of the movie. So when he publicly compliments Dixon, it makes sense because we've never seen Dixon as a villain. It's not like a turnaround. He's only ever been at worst a flawed anti-hero for us.
Yeah.
So it's like, so that makes total sense.
But again, all the touches. He leaves the ring before he even finds out.
That's what. Yeah.
It's amazing.
And it's that kind of cycling back to the logic of the original movie. It's only the performance that matters. The outcome is almost irrelevant. But it's also a great, it's also his curtain call,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure at the time it felt like it was the last time he'd ever play the character.
He thought so.
Yeah. So clearly, this is.
I mean, he told Coogler, he's like, I think I played it out with Rocky Balboa, and he's like, but just listen to the idea. And he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, his last bow to the audience, and his connection with people.
Mm-hmm.
But the movie doesn't end there. So we have we have our first ending, which is the kind of freeze frame on him, like grabbing a hand from the crowd,
Mm-hmm.
which is perfectly fine. I'm gonna say, if it ended there, you wouldn't feel cheated. Then he puts a rose on his wife's gravestone. He goes all soft focus and disappears, a la Without a Trace. So I don't know if in the next movie Rocky is a missing person.
Or right. Or buried next to his wife.
And this is full on sentimental melodramatic ending, but
sure,
again, earned.
Yeah.
And it's not that you can't do that in this movie, but you have to know how to keep it in check, and the movie has kept
it does do that. Yeah.
Yeah, the movie keeps it in check, and now is the time to splurge, right? And then we're into so that's the second ending. Okay, so we're 2 for 2 now. Then we have a sequence which I'm interested to hear how you feel about, of the general public imitating Rocky's
right
running up the steps famous moment. How do you feel about that, sir? I mean, it's not the movie at its finest.
No, yes, exactly right. It feels indulgent, I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah. Presumably an iPhone talked to him at a pizza parlor and told him. And
you know what you should do? I got an idea.
Hello, I'm YouTube. There's lots of clips of you doing this on YouTube and a bunch of people doing it on their phones.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk about it too much. It's indulgent.
I don't want to have to think about this.
We don't have to belabor.
Well, it's cheesy. It's early internet
the unnecessariness of it.
It's cheesy. It's early internet age. Let me tell you, this is better than another recap montage, which is
I'll agree with that.
Would have done.
I'll take that over a recap montage. Yeah.
But I think it sort of thematically fits with this idea of like the slippage between fact and fiction in Rocky movies.
Yeah.
It's a good way of playing that out. But I gotta say, like, the last ending is the best ending. It's him looking out over the steps. That is the correct ending for this movie.
Yeah.
We've tried 3 or 4. This is the one.
Finished.
Yeah, that is the one. But I don't begrudge them have like why shouldn't he have fun and see some like babies climbing a?
Sure.
I mean, once Tommy Gunn has done it, all bets are off.
All bets are off. Right.
I mean, he could have like an octopus going up there.
It's just him and his dog this time.
And then my final note is about this. This is, and that's all credit check, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
We sort of in somewhere in between the second and third ending of this movie, the credits started.
Right.
This is the most cultured soundtrack in the series.
Yeah.
It's full of opera and classical music.
You're right.
And modern classics like Smokey Robinson. But there still isn't a Rocky film that Frank Stallone can't get his hands on somewhere.
I know.
Because he's also, but I mean that's
those like dirty mitts are gonna make their way into these movies.
Yeah, it like the very because I mean he opens the movie right basically with the Trash Can Singers open the movie.
Yeah, I think so.
So there's a sense of again that kind of like
Trash Can Singers.
what else would you call them?
No, there's nothing. There's literally nothing else to call them.
Frank Stallone and the Trash Can Singers.
Yeah.
So that's all I had for this.
All right.
This movie, but
well,
safe to say I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, it's a really great movie. It's a great movie. It really is.
Yeah.
And a great sequel.
Yeah. And a great final movie.
Yeah.
Not that this is the final movie.
Not that, yeah.
But it would...
his story it is, though. You know, we're going to move on to Creed's story. But,
right.
you know, and Rocky is a part of that story. But this closes out the Rocky saga well.
Yeah. I think as it's better than any series I can... I mean, you know, we'll be on the lookout to see if this ever happens again, but right now this is the front runner.
Yeah.
Of belated sequels that cap off the series.
That cap off the series. You're right. Yeah, absolutely.
This is Fury Road. I don't know. That's the only other one.
Ooh,
that comes to mind.
Yeah.
But that's you know, that's an entirely different cast.
And they have more coming.
Oh, okay.
So.
Yeah, then I don't think that counts.
It's more of a different thing.
I also think, I mean, I secret smart guy. I also think this was secretly quite an influential movie, at least where American cinema is concerned. Not just because of Creed, although obviously, you know.
Mm-hmm.
This.
How else?
Well, just this sort of like when watching this, and then I'm comparing it to like movies that are about. Like East Coast white working class toughness, like The Fighter and Silver Linings Playbook, and it's like the character of Angie, the way Marie is introduced to us, the whole idea of the Lucky Seven Tavern,
right?
Like the way that's moved on from this kind of like, it in Rocky V it was like Cheers,
right?
Now it's like that, it's like Horace and Pete.
Right. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it's this soulless, empty place. So it's like, I don't know. It's just like the next, you know, various movies starring Jennifer Lawrence that are about how you know, loud and aggressive people on the East Coast are.
Yes.
Working class neighborhoods.
That's great. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is Rocky Balboa. If you have something to add, by all means, you let us know. We want to know where Rocky Balboa lies for you in the series. Is it your favorite as well, or do you like something else? Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. Tom, say goodbye to the good people.
What's so special about Italian food cooked by a bunch of Mexicans?
You ended with racism?
Of course.
All right.
Hey, Paulie's got a point.
Because they're the best cooks.
Because they're the best cooks. And once again, this movie does not pretend that's as you know and as I know, that's... You know, without Mexicans, there is no.
Go to any restaurant in the world, and that's where you're going to find great cooks making great food, no matter, you know, what style of cuisine.
Even the guy doing the dishes.
Yeah.
Who is, you know, also a priest. We didn't talk about that, did we?
They
managed to amalgamate Father Carmine and Spider into one kind of uber